The world watched in horror. It was September 1st, 1939. Nazi Germany unleashed its military might on Poland. This act of aggression shattered the fragile peace. Explosions rocked Warsaw. German tanks rolled across the Polish border. The Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, filled the skies. Their target airfields, roads and cities. Poland, though caught off guard, fought back with fierce determination. Europe in the late 1930s was a powder keg. The Treaty of Versailles, signed after World War I, had left Germany deeply resentful. The global economic depression fueled instability and fear. Extreme ideologies like Nazism in Germany gained traction. Nations formed alliances seeking security in a world on the brink. On one side stood the Axis powers, led by Germany, Italy and Japan. On the other side were the Allied forces, including Great Britain, France and eventually the United States. Three figures loomed large over the events of 1939: Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin and Winston Churchill. These men, each with their own ambitions and ideologies, would shape the course of history in ways that the world had never seen before. Hitler, driven by his twisted ideology, sought to expand Germany's territory and dominance. His vision of a greater Germany was rooted in a dangerous mix of nationalism and racial purity. He believed that the Aryan race was superior and that it was his destiny to lead them to greatness. He saw war as the means to achieve his goals. The invasion of Poland in September 1939 marked the beginning of a conflict that would engulf the entire world. Hitler's aggressive tactics and military strategies were designed to quickly overpower and subjugate his enemies. Stalin, the dictator of the Soviet Union, made a pact with Hitler, believing it would buy him time. Stalin's primary concern was to strengthen his own position and the Soviet Union's defenses. He was wary of Hitler's ambitions but saw the non-aggression pact as a temporary measure to avoid immediate conflict. This agreement, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, secretly divided Eastern Europe between them. It was a cynical move that shocked the world, as two ideologically opposed regimes found common ground in their desire for territorial expansion. The pact allowed Hitler to focus on his Western front without fear of Soviet intervention. Churchill, newly appointed as Britain's Prime Minister, recognized the grave danger posed by Hitler. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Churchill understood that appeasement would only embolden the Nazi regime. He was determined to stand firm against the tide of fascism that threatened to engulf Europe. He vowed to fight for freedom and democracy. Churchill's speeches rallied the British people and inspired resistance against the Axis powers. His leadership during the darkest days of the war was instrumental in maintaining the morale and resolve of the Allied forces. Through his unwavering commitment, Churchill became a symbol of hope and defiance. The Polish people faced the full brunt of the Nazi war machine. They fought bravely, but they were outmatched. German troops, equipped with superior firepower and employing blitzkrieg tactics, advanced rapidly. Polish cities endured relentless bombing raids. Civilians were caught in the crossfire, their lives upended by the chaos. The Polish government, forced to flee to Romania, refused to surrender. The spirit of resistance burned brightly, even in the darkest hours. Section 5, Blitzkrieg, a new face of warfare. The invasion of Poland showcased a new and terrifying form of warfare, blitzkrieg. This lightning war strategy relied on speed, surprise, and overwhelming force. German tanks, supported by mobile infantry and dive bombers, punched through enemy lines, creating chaos and confusion. The Luftwaffe targeted strategic locations, crippling communication and disrupting defenses. Blitzkrieg proved devastatingly effective in the early stages of the war. It left defenders reeling and unable to mount an effective counterattack. Section 6, the home front, echoes of war. The outbreak of war sent shockwaves across the globe. Nations mobilized their armies and prepared for a protracted conflict. Rationing was introduced in many countries, limiting the consumption of essential goods. Factories switched to wartime production, churning out weapons and ammunition. Propaganda posters appeared on city streets, urging citizens to support the war effort. The world had entered a new and uncertain chapter, forever marked by the shadow of war. Section 7. A world at war: declarations and consequences. Germany's aggression could not go unanswered. On September 3, 1939, Great Britain and France, honouring their treaty obligations to Poland, declared war on Germany. The British Empire, including Canada, Australia and New Zealand, soon followed suit. World War II, the deadliest conflict in human history, had begun. The declarations of war marked a turning point. The world was now divided into two armed camps, locked in a struggle that would determine the fate of freedom and democracy. Section 8. The Phony War. A deceptive lull. After the swift conquest of Poland in September 1939, a period known as the Phony War, or Sitzkrieg, settled over Western Europe. This phase, which lasted from October 1939 to April 1940, was marked by an eerie calm. Despite the declarations of war by France and Britain against Germany, there was an unexpected and almost surreal lack of major military operations on the Western Front. Soldiers from both sides found themselves in a strange limbo, waiting in trenches and fortifications, anticipating an attack that never seemed to come. The vast battlefields remained eerily empty, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded in Poland. France and Britain, dug in behind their defensive lines, adopted a cautious approach. The French relied heavily on the Maginot Line, a series of fortifications along the German border, while the British Expeditionary Force bolstered their defences. Both nations were wary of provoking a full-scale conflict, hoping to avoid the devastating trench warfare of World War I. Meanwhile, Germany, having secured its eastern border with the conquest of Poland, focused on consolidating its gains and preparing for future offensives. The German military used this time to regroup, rearm and strategize, knowing that the initial phase of their blitzkrieg had been successful. This period of relative calm was deceptive. On the surface, life in Western Europe seemed to continue as normal. Towns and cities were peaceful and daily routines went on uninterrupted. However, beneath this veneer of tranquility, tensions were simmering. The phony war masked the brewing storm that would soon engulf Europe in full-scale war. Both sides were preparing for the inevitable clash, stockpiling weapons and fortifying positions. The deceptive lull would soon give way to a conflict of unprecedented scale and devastation. Section 9. The Legacy of 1939. A turning point in history. The events of 1939, culminating in the invasion of Poland, marked a turning point in human history. This invasion was not just a military maneuver, but a signal that the world was on the brink of a conflict that would reshape nations and redefine borders. The aggression displayed by the German forces was a stark reminder of the fragile nature of peace and the ever-present threat of tyranny. The world watched in horror as the forces of aggression were unleashed. Civilians caught in the crossfire faced unimaginable hardships. Families were torn apart, homes were destroyed, and the very fabric of society was threatened. The invasion of Poland was not just a geopolitical event, it was a human tragedy on an unprecedented scale. The fragile peace that had followed World War I lay shattered. The hopes and dreams of a generation that had endured the Great War were dashed as Europe once again descended into chaos. The interwar period, marked by economic turmoil and political instability, had failed to secure lasting peace. The lessons of the past seemed forgotten as the world hurtled towards another devastating conflict. World War II, a conflict of unprecedented scale and brutality, had begun. The battles that ensued were fought with a ferocity and intensity that the world had never seen before. From the beaches of Normandy to the deserts of North Africa, soldiers from all corners of the globe were drawn into the fray. The war would last 6 long years, leaving a trail of destruction and loss in its wake. The legacy of 1939 serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the human cost of unchecked ambition and tyranny. The cities that once bustled with life were reduced to rubble, and the lives that were once full of promise were cut short. Memorials stand today as silent witnesses to the sacrifices made and the lessons learned. It is a call to remember the past, learn from its lessons, and strive for a future where dialogue and diplomacy prevail over conflict and destruction. The formation of international bodies like the United Nations was a direct response to the horrors of the war, aiming to foster cooperation and prevent future conflicts. As we reflect on the events of 1939, we are reminded of our collective responsibility to build a world where peace is not just a fleeting moment, but a lasting reality.